What's up, sassy gamers? Welcome to another SASS Interviews, and I'm with, obviously, Day Drinker, Brian, and Bruno, or Kelly, I guess, not Day Drinker only. But we also have...
Bruno or Kelly?
I'm a night drinker today.
Bruno's alias is now Kelly?
Yeah.
We're interchangeable. It's fine.
Wow.
That's news to her husband.
We're here with Elijah Claude, who's
I stand by what I said.
He's actually with Futurus. It's a company out of Atlanta that features into the VR space, which I'll let him get into all that. But he...
And it doesn't actually have a question mark.
It's not
yeah.
Futurus?
Even though I may have said it that way. He is the XR Design Strategist. And I know most of you listening are probably like, I knew two words out of that, but not the XD or XR, excuse me. Like, what does that mean? And that's kind of what I'm going to open the show up with. Like, so tell me a little bit about Futurus and tell me what does an XR Design Strategist do?
Yeah, definitely. So XR, I'll start there, means extreme reality. So we make reality better. No. Just stands for extended reality.
So does my drug dealer.
Right.
Yeah, right?
That's kind of the dream, but no.
Not suitable for kids.
XR is just extended reality. So it's kind of an umbrella term for all virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, if you want to put that in there too. And Futurus, as a company, we call ourselves a Futurus technology company, in which we utilize all manners of different technologies, usually just augmented and virtual reality at the moment. And my job there as an XR design strategist is to make sure I can take, different visions that our clients have or any other projects that we're having and try to make it real, try to make it realistic and user friendly and stuff like that. It's sort of related to UX design, if you're familiar with that, user experience design, except I don't do too many visuals. So mostly the fun stuff, at least in my opinion. But yeah, that's more or less what it entails at the high level.
So
Okay.
do you have an opinion on or maybe examples of what's better in say virtual reality versus what's better in augmented reality?
I always like to put it like this. These are kind of on the same spectrum, but virtual reality is the end goal of where we want to be, right? Because the ultimate goal of virtual reality is to be fully immersed in a computer, in a simulation, if you will, kind of full dive technology. So what's better there are simulations, things that you can be fully immersed in a space and look all around you and not have to worry about the real world too much. Versus augmented reality is putting the computer out into the world, so you can look at things and calculate them and put in your own creations in the world and things like that. So being able to essentially put a filter or a lens or something like that to add more information, or I guess even take some away, but that's kind of gets really tricky there.
We can go down that path.
Yeah, right. But yeah, if it's additive into actual reality, then AR is a good use case there. If it's about being immersed in a full virtual world, then VR is of course better there.
Well, it's actually a good point. You mentioned something that I was going to touch on later, but since you already brought it up, is the end goal is the virtual reality, right? So we see things like, Ready Player One, right? Where the kid puts his VR on and he's totally in the Oasis. Do you think we're ever going to get there? Or is there a way higher than that? Or, what do you think?
Yeah. I definitely think we're going to get there. But it's probably going to take a lot longer than people are thinking. I know a lot of, I don't know if you all like naming names here, but, Meta, Facebook, have this whole plan of creating the metaverse in the next 10 years or so. That's not going to happen. Just I don't know how much you want to get into it. But
Sorry, Mark.
Not in the way that they try and sell it, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of interesting things that's going to happen, of course, and I think that's already happening. But just the sheer amount of engineering and physics that needs to happen in order to be fully immersed in a virtual world, just on the level of Ready Player One, is going to be extremely difficult. And then beyond that is something like, Sword Art Online or Log Horizon, where you're actually inside the game. And so you're going to need, brain computer interfaces. You're going to need to somehow figure out our brain, put it in the computer or vice versa.
Get people to
Yeah.
trust it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think
Yeah.
that's a good,
You wouldn't let Elon Musk just poke
People
at your
don't even
head,
trust the COVID vaccine.
I think that's a brilliant point there, Elijah, too, because, Ready Player One, and people can dog on that all they want, but
Right.
there was some good things that they did with trying to solve the problems of like, oh, how do you pretend like you're running? How do you pretend like you're moving around? Like he was even suspended by essentially bungee cords at one point. Haptic feedback suit so he could feel certain things. And that's solutions using kind of the technology that we have today, where what you mentioned was like that next level of like, okay, take it away from where you're physically moving your body or you're physically feeling something and having information shunted directly into your nervous system and to your brain, so your brain just feels like it's actually moving or feels like it's actually feeling something. And I think that's definitely, I could see that being the 25 years from now or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely scary. I'm not going to say kind of scary. It's definitely scary, but super exciting as well. Like, just think about it. Like, that's one of my dreams, of being able to just take whatever I'm thinking and put it out in the world. Because one of my biggest kind of friction points for being a creative person is that I have very little patience with figuring out tools. All right. So if it comes to drawing or writing or anything, I'm just you know what, I get to a point, I'm just like, whatever, but if I can just take all this creativity I have in my mind and just boom, make it real, then that is just an astronomically amazing way to be more creative and be more productive and everything like that. But that's far away.
That's an
really
amazing
cool
reversal with what I was just saying too, because that's like not just putting the signals into your mind, but bringing all that creativity and signals back out in a clear and concise way. That's pretty amazing. I like that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be necessary to get there.
So, speaking of designing, what about, like, I get how to make 2D, and even 3D games, but how do you get to the point where, like, designing in not just 3D, but like in a virtual reality sense, where like you have to account for like, point of view and depth and all of that. How does that work? Like, how do you get to that point?
Yeah. So right now I'm actually still working on trying to figure out this process, because it's something that has still not really been figured out for the last 8 years that VR has been existing so far. So my current process, how it works is that I start with first getting just on paper, just writing out what we want to happen, right? What's the general idea of what we want this simulation to be? And then I create a storyboard based on these kind of key elements that we want. And the storyboard is just a simple, like a script, like a movie script. And so I'm writing out, okay, we're going to have these scenes, we're going to have these interactions and so on and so forth. But the tricky part is, number one, having to describe what's going to happen without leaning on moving the camera and stuff like that, right? Because in games and in movies, you can move the camera. So it's easy to say, okay, we're going to focus on this and then focus on that. And then, blah, blah, blah. You cannot do that in VR. People will instantly get sick, right?
And it's not their point of view.
Yeah.
That's the other thing.
Yeah.
It's hard to see yourself in like fourth person, the fourth wall kind of thing. Would be kind of weird.
Yeah. So what I do is try to focus on, okay, what's the focal point of this scene, right? If this scene is to, handle this, because we do a lot of simulations with like factory workers and trying to do safety procedures. So if the scene is like, okay, focus on using this fire extinguisher, for instance, right? Then we have to focus on this scene. And if we want to change that, then we have to have somebody in the scene, another character, say, okay, we're going to go over there, right? And then then that person will walk away.
Okay,
and then the player can now, I have to go over there. And so that's how you change the scene. You can also do cuts. So kind of a forceful teleport, if you will. So you say, okay, we're going to go over there, but instead of you walking there or teleporting there, I'm just going to, cut out, and then fade back into the correct location. But it is tricky to do that because if you don't, once again, say where you're going, people are going to be confused, like, okay, where am I? How did I get here? And so on and so forth. So it is, you still have to signal it. But the storyboard itself, of course, is just not sufficient, right? Because a lot of people can't really envision all of these elements that's going on. So what I do next is create a visual storyboard based on like a user flow that I don't want to. We don't have to get all the way into that, but like just pointing out like all the different steps, and then make a visual 3D representation of it. So I use a tool called Shapes XR because, once again, I have very little patience for 3D modeling or anything like that. Shapes XR is for dummies like myself. I can just easily, scratch some stuff in there, put some boxes together, and make a little,
is that the one that auto snaps like simple designs, and like you can have a 3D like STL file for like, I think we heard about that at PAX, Brian. That was one of the programs they had offered during the cosplay class, 3D class.
Yeah,
I remember that.
What's it called?
Yes.
Shapes XR?
Shapes XR. It's a free tool on the Oculus Quest or Meta Quest, whatever. But it's a great, mechanism, is a great resource for being able to easily sketch out, what you want to happen in this 3D world. You can show a good perspective, scale, and then they have stages, so you can then you say, okay, in this scene, this is going to change, and this scene is going to, change again, so on and so forth. And that really gets people, envisioning what the scene is going to be once you actually put it in Unity or something like that to make it real.
Makes sense.
So I know it was a lot.
Really
but,
cool.
So what is your idea of the metaverse? I told you I was going to ask you this.
Yeah. I actually do love this question because I do believe in the metaverse. I'll say that first, right? And what I mean by that is like there's a kind of negativity going on today, which is understandable. It's like, oh, metaverse is all going to be terrible, whatever. But in reality, I think a lot of people will enjoy the metaverse. And to me, when I envision the metaverse, I envision it as just the future of the internet, where things are more spatial, things are more immersive, things are more open to whatever you want to do with it, right? So we can get a little bit into the history here because I think that is important with Neuromancer and Snow Crash, where they, was the first they first coined the metaverse, of course. So if you don't know about that, please go check it out. But
I said Ready Player One earlier just because like most people probably haven't heard of that, but yeah.
But Brian's a huge.
You scored points at Brian on that one.
Yeah, Snow Crash is great. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And not the only first coining of terms too, like first coining of avatar for someone within a metaverse. But it
was really amazing what they did there. But it is important to remember that it is a dystopian fiction, right? And so the setting was that like the world was terrible, right? All these private companies took over the US and all these other nations. So everything was privatized,
hyperinflation,
monopolized, hyperinflation, everything, right? And so the metaverse was like the only place people can go to like do things. And so it was still kind of not great because there was like a monopoly on who owned the metaverse, like all the property, all the IP and stuff like that, or the technology of how it operates. But it was still very exciting because you had this world where it was a 3D space, right? Where you can, go to a club and talk to people, around the world and all this other stuff. And this sounds kind of, mundane today. But remember, this came out like in the 90s, I believe. And so this was before the internet was even the internet as we know it. So just the ability to talk to people around the world was very new. But then to do that in 3D and you had an avatar that embodied who you were, that's amazing, right? Even to this day, we still don't really have an embodied identity online, right? You go in Discord, you have this identity. You go on Twitter, you have this one, so on and so forth. But that's not who you are. So it's really difficult to feel immersed in the internet. It just feels like you're kind of looking at windows and stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
And,
I think another thing to add to there, just to continue the Snow Crash, and I just looked it up. It's 1992, so good memory there. But one of the things that he also talked about too was like people who were just going on the metaverse for the first time and didn't have that like custom avatar, that custom identity, and they had these like off the shelf, and they literally called them like, I think, brandies and like Kens or something else. And they were these
It's
like
Fortnite,
yeah, very much like Fortnite. Like it was this basic
Scoring all the
avatar,
points of Brian tonight.
and you can make it right. You can make these small, like tweaks and changes to it to make a small, like off the shelf changes, but it was still like something that was considered inexpensive.
Exactly.
It's funny hearing you guys talk about this dynamic because it existed in a game called Second Life.
Yeah.
And has
that's
existed
right.
for a decade.
Yeah. So
Well, Second Life is like old now. Like I think that was
Yeah.
early 2000s. So
Yeah.
That's what I
Games
said,
have
about a
been trying to live
decade.
that out.
Well, yeah, a little bit over a decade.
2
but-
decades ago.
I don't know. Did they?
Old, he's like
I'm
85.
surprised. I don't know that I ever heard, but I wouldn't be surprised if Second Life has tried to make a move into the VR space. But I haven't really paid attention to that game. But it
Yeah,
would,
they have.
oh, they have. Okay.
I think it's called it's been a while since I looked at it. It wasn't great.
Third
honestly.
Life.
I mean, Second Life wasn't great in the first
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
Hey, people made some good money off of it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That is true.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I know this is probably one of the things you're interested in as well, and was touched on in Snow Crash, which was the concept of, with all of this technology, especially technology beaming stuff into our eyes. You talk about heads-up displays in cars, the concept that you can have an LCD screen that can turn transparent so you can see through it like a windshield, but then can become opaque so you can't see through it. And which is great because you're like, oh yeah, self-driving and this, that, and the other, and like watching something else on my windscreen or something like that. But then comes in the concept of bad actors, or which is what they call hackers nowadays. And kind of a little bit of the ethics around VR and XR.
Yeah. And that was also a big part of Snow Crash. Is I believe that's like the main plot, right? It's people getting hacked and getting crashed.
Yeah.
They have this fuzz that kind of.
Oh, is that where the? Okay, I haven't read it yet.
I haven't read it either,
bought
but
it for
yeah.
me.
So
Yeah.
spoilers.
Yeah, no, that's really that's
God,
awesome.
we can't read it now.
But no,
That's
that's a
actually-
huge part.
A great title. Now that I think I was like, I wonder where. I'm learning so much.
Yeah. But as a like designer, what excites me about what the metaverse can be, right, is realizing that just the simplicity of putting yourself in a 3D space online is actually very powerful, right? Because we didn't evolve to look at screens. We
Right.
evolved to be in the spatial area. A huge part of our intelligence is mapped to a spatial area, a spatial kind of existence around us. So if we can bring that to the internet, then that means we can use more of our spatial intelligence in order to find things, to identify things, to learn things, and so on and so forth. And that is super underrated, right? People think it's just, I would just want to play games online or whatever, or just have an avatar. Avatar is great too, like I said before, but think about how much easier it is to find things in your house versus to find things on your file system on your computer.
Right.
Like, yes, you can search on your computer, but many people know who use Windows. That searching is not great, right? You have to do all this just to organize.
Hey,
your
I found your item. It's somewhere in this house.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me show you all the items.
First of all, unless you're my husband, in which case you need me to find the thing in my house. So.
Right.
Male pattern blindness.
Outsource that
Yes,
out.
male pattern blindness.
Yeah, I suffer from that too.
But
I'd
yeah,
be
that-
amazing in the virtual world.
So I guess
Well,
right
and-
now, with
I-
like I said, with your metaverse idea, is there anything that you'd want to change for the better right now? Like, not necessarily like where we're going, but is there anything right now that you think you could probably do better? If you
right now is interoperability. The whole thing about the metaverse right now is it doesn't exist because it's not interoperable. It's just a bunch of different virtual worlds and things like that. A big part of the metaverse is being like the internet, where you can just go to this website and share this link here and go back and forth between all these different areas of the internet. You can't do that today, right? If you're in Facebook space, you can't shift your avatar or any items away to VR chat or Fortnite or whatever like that. So being able to send items, send ideas. Yeah, Rec Room is another great one.
Yeah.
Being able to send things between these virtual worlds will be a huge step in the way of what makes a good metaverse, or what makes a metaverse, period. So that interoperability is a huge portion. And I do want to shout out, if I can,
Sure.
a group I'm in called Open Metaverse. Oh goodness, Open Metaverse Interoperability Group, OMI. So we've been trying to build like standards and things that help the metaverse become interoperable. So that's a huge, kind of passion of mine. There's a huge amount of a lot of great people in that group.
so cool.
So yeah, go check them out as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's almost
saying something, Brian?
that almost sounds like when you're saying that, like, the internet having HTTP and HTML hypertext markup language. It's almost like we need a VRML, virtual
Exactly.
reality markup language that, to have that interoperability where, like, oh, I can program this over here, and because of the same language, you can use it over here. Now, the image files may not be able to be attached, but at least the language is there, and you could substitute something in. So,
Like the meta tags. Is that what we're talking about? Meta tags.
Yeah, meta
for
tags,
the
everything,
metaverse?
Yeah, all that. Yeah, there's people working on that right now. It's a very hard problem, but I think it's going to be crucial for us to really get there.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, and I didn't really want to bring this up because, like, there's so much around this with another conversation.
we already
but a
brought
lot
up
to
Ready
do
Player One.
Well, right, but no, like in that sense, like the blockchain, right? We talk about NFTs and all these things that exist in the blockchain. Well, it's the same thing. Like, there's so many different blockchains out there that, like, you can't take this item, this NFT, and move it to this place because they don't all interact. Like, it's not there. So
Yeah.
Why do we have to talk about NFTs?
Well, and I hate to jump in here because like the whole thing about, like, there's a place for some of these things, but when they sit there and they're saying they're decentralized, they're not.
Yeah.
There's a specific set of people who have set this up and who set the prices and the gas fees and everything else. And it's very centralized. And it's actually the opposite of what we've just been talking about, where we need this interoperability between things. And the blockchain is not only very centralized, but also very slow. So it's not going to be able to allow that type of thing there. Elijah, I'm kind of talking over to you, so I apologize.
No, that's good. I think it is important to bring it up, even though it is extremely frustrating, because it's something I've been paying attention to since the very beginning. And one of my frustrations with it is the focus on, like, the monetary side of it. I understand why, of course, because it's the system we live under, but the fact that the focus is on the monetary side means that it's necessarily, kind of centralized, because people have to set, the rates and all this other stuff for it to be viable. Right. But if you focus, this blockchain technology on something like, creativity, right? Like, instead of focusing on, like, instead of creating NFTs that just try to, put a price on, whatever you create, what if you created an NFT that just gave gratitude for thinking something,
Right.
for creating something? So you can mint something, not to, make money off of it, but to just say, hey, I created this. And now other people can see forever that, yeah, you created this. And if I copy it, then it's still going to be on the chain that, okay, my copy came from this person. And so we can always figure out, where something came from and, give them thanks or give them, whatever. Yeah, you can monetize from there or whatever else you want to do. But that focus on monetization before utility, right, means that it's really difficult now to create that utility. So I do think it's super important. And there are some people who are working on this from a different, kind of perspective. But yeah, that's something for people to think about who are working in this space.
Now, I think if, like, I talk to my parents, I'm like, oh, virtual reality. Like, they just think, like, oh, it's a place you go and you play games, stuff like that. But you did mention earlier that, you helped create things like, safety stuff and, how to use this fire extinguisher. What are some other uses that you come up with for virtual reality to, like, help people or just things that would, for other generations that it would be unexpected?
Yeah. I'll start from the simple stuff and then go on from there. The first thing people usually think about is, like, real estate and, like, architecture. So being able to, visualize an environment in VR is incredibly huge. because you know, you don't have to prototype all this stuff with real resources and spend all that stuff, and you can just do it virtually. And
if you want to remodel your home, you know what it's going to look like, or build a brand new home, you know what it's going to look like.
And that's incredible, really right? Yeah. That's something that, you know, a lot of people can use to this day. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of tools for people who are like average people to, you know, remodel their home in VR, but that's something that should be there. Another one is kind of going up the chain is education, right? Being able to immerse yourself in an environment. Yeah. There's an experience old as time at this point called The Lab, one of the first kind of VR experiences with Valve. And they had a lot of like really cool little mini games, but one of them was not really a game, but an experience. It was like a solar system, and you can just pop this in, and then you can see the realistic scale of, you know, the galaxy, and that's amazing because people today still don't really understand how the scale of, you know, space and stuff like that. And they had another one for anatomy, and it showed like these little slices of, you know, your body and stuff like that. And, you know, being able to be immersed in that is incredible, right? So imagine
Daedric
that
would love to be immersed in body parts.
I'm so into it. I could see like, you know, how, especially during the pandemic. So I've got 2 little kids, and field trips were canceled, right? Yeah. And so I can see how, as a kid, to be able to like be in that virtual reality and go to the botanical gardens or go to the aquarium and learn all that stuff that you would learn by physically being there, but because of, you know, reasons outside of our control, not be able to, but still have that amazing experience.
I think to add on to that, and Zycia will like this too, is being able to bring those experiences to those that for whatever reason can't go to those places, whether they're stuck in a hospital or they're unable to travel because of physical conditions,
live in Nebraska,
immune compromised, live in Nebraska. I mean, like, goodness gracious.
It's a joke. Sorry. Elijah's in on it too, so we're good.
That's great.
Yeah, that is super important too, though, because it's good to remember that even in the 21st century, there's a huge population here in America even that does not have access to the internet. Right, is to have
here in our city that don't have access.
Yeah,
to it.
Well, that's because the trash can or the trash truck runs it over. But
that's another inside joke. We'll explain that later.
I can.
But no, you are. Atlanta, no, you're absolutely correct. You know, the internet should be a utility that everybody has access to. It should not be something that you only have access to if you have, you know, if you're in a certain, you know, economic class, first of all.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is it started off with something as we really didn't know it was necessary. And then it kind of turned into something that has become a utility, because it is something that, like, I mean, you look at other countries, I'm not going to say any names, but some countries that like to censor their people, right? So like they're not able to see, like, the internet's the only thing they had. And you think like some people have, I think have used the metaphor of like clouds in the sky is real thick fog, but then you have a tower that goes past the fog and has the beacon. And that's the internet for them, because they can't see anything around them, but they're able to connect to this thing and be able to see what's going on in the world. And if you take that tower down, then they're basically stuck in the past, really, you know?
Yeah. There was, what was it? There was something where one of the countries was blocking a whole bunch of the internet, and they weren't blocking something else. And I want to say maybe it was Steam or something like that, or maybe it was chat in a game itself. And literally most of the people in that country were getting news of the outside world through that channel.
Yeah.
Well, I know, like, look at Minecraft. They have like the library, right? Like something that's supposed to be there for some countries that they can only play Minecraft. They can't play whatever else, but they could join that and then go to this library and learn actual things in the world, like actual news, because they're storing everything there for this, you know, virtual reality kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, we keep talking about the internet, but I think we're all trying to say virtual reality should be the same thing, you know?
Well, and in some ways they are. I mean, Minecraft, even when it's just on your monitor with 2D, is a virtual reality.
Right?
It's not a 3D virtual reality, but it kind of is. And I think that's kind of a good stepping stone for people to know, so they're not so afraid about this concept of doing what we call virtual reality, where you put on goggles, you can't see stuff, and like,
and you run into your own walls, and
yeah,
Yeah, that's actually a big part of like my own dream for the metaverse is like being able to create more 3D worlds just on the monitor on your phone, right? Where you can turn your own personal website into, like almost like Ready Player One, your own garage, right? Your own home. And then you can explore the world through this 3D space without the need of a headset or anything like that. I think getting people to think spatially online will be a huge step in the right direction as well. Because then you, again, like you said, people don't get scared of like, oh, VR is going to be, all this stuff. Like it's just life, reality is already VR. It's already 3D. So let's put that in the internet.
Yeah. Well,
oh God, the last thing I want to do is pay my bills in VR.
you too can sit at the DMV.
I don't know that I'd mind that too much if I could just like throw my paid bill at somebody in VR. They're gonna take my money angrily instead of like just going to this portal and paying a convenience fee of $9.95 to a 2D like really shoddy looking website, and it's like, all right, well, my money just disappeared in this hole.
Experience fee at that point.
It adds that experience. And like to that point, I really like using Elite Dangerous as a really great example where VR makes things easier. I tried playing Elite Dangerous my first time just like normally, and I could not get a decent grasp on that game in a time short enough for me to want to keep playing it. Yeah. And then I got like a really nice set of flight controls and a VR headset, and that game was so easy to play in VR because you just sit in a seat and all of your controls are just there.
Yeah, like, you just look around.
And it feels so well immersed that the control of the game and the complexity of it just kind of fades away. You're like, oh yeah, I have all my HUDs right in front of me, and you're just like flicking through the controls and stuff and throttle. It was just a whole different experience. It's way easier, and it's just like a taste of what's to come, I guess, and how much easier those games can be played when you have that level of immersion versus just like digesting it from your screen sitting in front of you.
I actually felt the same way with like shooter games, because I'm absolutely terrible with shooter games on the console, because I don't really play very many console games. So when I started try to play Apex or whatever, I'm just like fumbling around with the buttons, like, okay, which one? I try to remember which ones to shoot and jump and all this other stuff. But when I play like, Pavlov or something in VR, it's way more intuitive for me, because I'm just like, okay, I'm just holding the gun, look around, shoot, duck, dodge. I don't really have to think about what I'm pressing. It's just more, reacting.
Yeah, you're not. It's almost like you're removing that conversion of like you already know how something works, but now because of the medium you're playing it in is like on a monitor, you're adding in the level of like a conversion where you're like, okay, well now this the trigger is actually like a different trigger on my key, and then like zooming in is like square, or pressing down on the button, and then you get into VR and you're just like, well, I just aim and then I pull the trigger. And it shoots like my brain expects it to. So I'm where I'm supposed to be at with significantly less steps. For me, not for the person who coded it. That person suffered greatly.
I have so many stories about that too, because I operate a virtual reality arcade. So I saw that all the time, where people get in VR and like, oh, how do I duck? I'm like, duck.
just literally duck. That's awesome.
Yeah. So what button do I press to sneak?
That's even at like the levels of VR that we have right now, which if you think about it, pretty much track three things. Like they track your head, and it tracks multiple things in your head, like where you're facing and like ducking, how high you are, and your hands, and that's it. It doesn't track your feet, right? It doesn't. You can't kick. And I mean, one of the
depends on your setup.
Because you can have like the Vive setup in the room, and then
for the most part, for the it's like meta. Everybody's like, why don't people have legs in meta? Well, because they don't track your feet. That too.
That costs extra.
They've already proven that you can be naughty in meta and not need legs.
It actually does just cost extra. I've seen people with setups where they have the receivers on their ankles and stuff, and it's pretty cool. It works pretty well.
Yeah, VR chat. You see a
But
lot of that.
it's you still have to have the software program to like acknowledge it as well.
Yeah, the reverse kinematics. That's very complicated.
Yeah.
But so there's 5 questions that we ask all of our guests on our show, and hopefully you'll answer them great too.
Hopefully you'll answer them correctly, or else.
or you'll be stuck in the metaverse.
No pressure.
There are, in fact, correct answers to this. Only one correct answer
We
per
left
question.
that part out?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. So, now the first question I like to ask is, what's your favorite animated character from a game, a movie, a cartoon, a comic? It could be anything. Just, what's your favorite animated character?
Yeah, this one is really hard because I'm very indecisive.
Everybody says that.
I don't have favorites.
Yeah.
But I will say kind of like my first favorite that I remember, first one that I really liked and tried to emulate was Vegeta. Of course, Dragon Ball Z. Especially later on, like his character, he has an actual character arc, right?
Yeah, the actual
He does.
Exactly.
I mean, he starts with the pink shirt with Badman on the back, but
you gotta like his style too, And I do realize that I started thinking more about this, and a lot of my other characters that I would probably call out are sort of in that that realm of that type of character. So I guess I have a type.
Yeah.
Nice. We all have a type.
I mean, Vegeta's a very specific type, and he's easy to pigeonhole into a type really early in that arc. Just it being last of his kind, almost from being a prince of a planet and that looks down on everyone else type thing. But like you said, he does have an arc throughout that whole series.
Yeah, and I really like that.
It's amazing.
Good character progression.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want me to continue or okay?
We'll continue. Yeah. Our next question.
I'll say, is he past this one? I think so. We'll
I love that answer. That answer was amazing.
Yeah, it was. That's a good character to choose. Our next question. I always the answers we get are interesting for this, but we'll see where this goes. What game do you play that you're embarrassed to tell your friends about?
I'm more so embarrassed that I don't play enough games, and that's what really kills me because I'm just like I should probably play more games.
Good answer. Good answer.
That is a good answer.
Survey says 100. Yeah, no, you're good.
Okay, you got that one right. Okay, you're 2 for 2 so far. If you could eat one meal anywhere in the world, where and what would it be?
I'm gonna cheat here and say I eat the cartoon meals.
That's
they
also a
always look
great answer.
So delicious. I'm just like, I remember Tom and Jerry from the beginning is just like, why does that look so good and juicy and
Shaggy sandwiches?
Yes.
No, for me, if we're gonna talk cartoon
giant
meals,
sandwiches.
if somebody can put me in full dive VR in Studio Ghibli buffet style food,
oh my gosh,
they could kill me. They could kill me right after that, and I'd be fine with it.
Yeah.
Well, also,
buffet,
let's not forget the amazing meals that they serve up to you in Monster Hunter. Like when the Meowscular chef brings you this entire thing of like meat, circular pieces of meat skewered and like, God.
It's called a fogo de chao, Brian.
Yeah. Well, except that it looks better in Monster Hunter.
You mean fogo de COVID these days, okay?
Yeah, true that.
Yeah, VR is not going to be there at a destination until we can eat good food.
True that.
In the
That would
metaverse.
be
yes,
phenomenal.
agreed, fantastic.
Hey, babe, what do you want to do tonight? Let's just get in VR and go eat at like this fancy restaurant in Italy. Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of
You don't need to get a babysitter. You don't.
Back to fooling your brain that it's actually receiving certain signals that aren't actually there. So
Yeah, I don't know how it's going to work, but
that's funny.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
There's a show called Made for Love, and I don't know if you guys have seen that.
It is such a fantastic show. Oh my
but
god, I didn't realize you watched that.
Yeah, if you haven't heard of it, it's on HBO, I believe.
HBO Max.
Yeah. And the premise of the show is that she's married to this guy who's basically the founder of like a Google or a Meta or something like
his last name
really
is
advanced. Yeah, it's Google, but it's I mean, come on.
Yeah.
But one of the points of the show is a flashback of like when he first meets his wife, and she basically walks into the back of like a truck, like a semi-truck container, and she's like, "What the heck is this? Like, this is supposed to be our date." And they walk in, and when she walks in, she's now like in this restaurant in Italy, and everything is like in motion. Like people are, "Oh, excuse me, ma'am, sorry," and she's just like, "Wait, what is this?" And he's like,
full on
"We're
holodeck
in a restaurant at this place. Like, have a seat, you know." And then she opens the plate, and it's like that's her favorite meal, and he's like, "What? Like that's what you said you loved." Like, and she's like, "How did you?" But the point is like that is like VR in the sense not even having a headset on or anything. She's just experiencing this like augmented reality, but it's so realistic that it drews in a container.
Yeah.
You know,
That's amazing. Yeah, I have to check that out.
That's a good show.
Yeah. Okay, so what's a game that you like that you don't think got a fair shake or it was overlooked?
Yeah, I was probably quite a few, but yeah, I'll probably go with the one I was talking with my brother with the other day. Is this GameCube game called 1080 Avalanche? It's very niche game. It's basically like a snowboarding game, right? And it's like you're racing downhill, but there's something about that just always calls back to me because it was so fun at the time. And it probably still is, but like you're just shredding, downhill and doing like amazing like flips and different tricks and everything like that. And so you can change, your how your character is moving to do these different tricks and everything like that. And I don't know, I'm just always thinking about like why isn't there a part 2 to this, or why isn't this in VR yet or something like that? Well, I know why it's not in VR, but still, like
I actually very vividly remember that game. Because I remember it being like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, but for snowboarding.
Yeah, probably there's a good description, but I don't know. I really enjoy that game. But that's the first thing that came to mind. There's probably a couple others like different MMOs and things like that. But yeah.
Awesome. And the last question here. So far, you made it to round 5. I mean, this is pretty good. You may get hired here soon.
We evaluate you afterward, though. So
All right, okay.
Yeah, we'll discuss the good and the bad later. No, so the last question I have for you is: if you could credit one person or an experience from your past which contributed to where you're at today, like who or what would that be?
Definitely just my obsession with wanting to invent hover cars. So
Cool.
yeah, I seriously, for probably like 10 years from like 3rd grade until high school, I was like, I seriously want to invent hover cars. I've been watching all these futuristic shows, the Jetsons and Fifth Element, and all these the Back to the Future, of course, and all this stuff. And I was like, why don't we have flying cars? And so I would every day after school, I would, go in and try to search things up. At first, I didn't have access to the internet, so went to my library and was looking up, books on the, magnetic levitation and all this other stuff. And then I remember when Google, was first kind of out there, because my first questions was like how to build hover car,
That is so cool.
And I was, I had like little notebooks and I was trying to, draw schematics and all this other stuff. And that brought me a long way of just getting more into technology and all this other stuff. And then it got me into looking at futuristic technology. It got me into looking at, society in general. And I eventually realized that a big reason why we don't have hover cars is not just, it is possible, but it's just not as practical as you would think, because the biggest problem is actually the infrastructure, right?
Yep.
I mean, I would say the biggest problem is the biggest problem is the people driving them. But
yeah, I was gonna say safety. Yeah, but infrastructure starts, and that's
Yeah.
And that's
Okay,
a big
so-
part of how people are driving.
So you say hover cars. Now, have you returned back to it and played Hover Junkers?
I
Junkers.
missed that game. Actually, when I first got into VR, I heard about the game, but I didn't have my own headset. It wasn't until like 2 or 3 years later or something like that, when I started working at the arcade, and I tried to find this game, but I could not find it. like I think they had took it off or something like that, or maybe it was just purely online and you couldn't play by yourself. But like for some reason or another, I wasn't actually able to play it, but it looked really cool. So.
Yeah, and it goes back to like you were talking about ducking, because like hover junkers, you make your own hover vehicle, and you just like put junk up to do walls, and you're going and attacking everybody. It's a free for all shooter, as it were, except for you're in this hover thing, and it's just like it is. Like you have this wall in front of you. You don't want to get a shot. You duck down behind it. You bring up your gun. You shoot over it.
So awesome.
I thought it was still on Steam, but because it is a multiplayer game, you have to have other people playing it too to have fun. So
yeah.
No, just real quick too. Super side note. George Jetson's birthday was July 31st, 2022. Just passed.
Did not realize that.
Yeah, my husband, he was like, today's George Jetson's birthday.
Well, actually, no, we're not, because that's his birthday. So that's
yeah. He's just started out.
Yeah.
Hovercraft's coming soon.
Well, I mean, he only worked with basically sprockets anyway.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, but tell me, and then listeners and the viewers out there, if we wanted to know more about... Or just
whisper it to Mike, and then he'll tell us later.
Yeah, if you want to tell us more about how we can find more about Futurus, or potentially any of your work, or any projects you're working on, sure.
Yeah. So Futurus, just, futurus.com. If you are, have safety training simulations or, or you want to do anything with VR, AR, whatever, reach out to us. Myself, I do a lot of like random stuff. Mostly like I have an audio journal where I'm just kind of sharing my thoughts on the future, or like just how I think different ways we can think about the world and stuff like that, called Thoughts of a Techno Wizard. So feel free to check that out. Thoughts of a Techno Wizard on pretty much any podcast out there. It's completely off the cuff, unedited, very rough. I do it like walk and talk. So I just walk outside and start talking to my phone. So it's very rough, but if you're interested in stuff like that, feel free to check that out.
Neat.
Yeah. I have a YouTube channel, Elijah Claude. I, just share like philosophy or what I'm learning about like anarchy or design or whatever interests me at the time. So that's probably where you can find me. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Hey man, it's been a pleasure. We I think I can speak for all of us and say we've had a blast tonight. And, and you're always welcome. If you ever want to come back and have another chat, feel free to let us know. We'd love to set that up.
Definitely. I'll be here next week. No.
All right.
Okay.
No, it was great talking to you all. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Hey, you take care, all right?
All right.
See ya.